Welcome to Echoes of Ancient Minds, where the world's most dangerous, forgotten, and overlooked philosophies come back to life. Every video, we dig up an idea history tried to bury, and ask what it still has to teach us today. 2,500 years ago, in India, a group of philosophers said something so dangerous, so threatening to religious power, that almost every piece of their original writing was destroyed. Their crime: they said there is no God, no soul, no afterlife, and that pleasure is the only thing actually worth chasing. This is Charvaka, and it almost vanished from history. Most people have never even heard the name Charvaka. That's not an accident. For centuries, this philosophy was treated as something to be argued against, ridiculed, or erased, not preserved. But buried underneath that erasure is one of the most radical ideas in the ancient world, that the only thing you can trust is what you can directly experience for yourself. Nothing else. Not scripture, not ritual, not promises of a soul that survives death. Just what your senses tell you, right now. Here's the central claim of Charvaka philosophy. The only valid source of knowledge is direct perception. If you can't see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, or smell it, you have no real grounds to believe it exists. That might sound obvious to a modern audience raised on science and evidence. But in ancient India, this was explosive. The dominant tradition of the time relied heavily on the authority of the Vedas, sacred scripture, and on elaborate rituals performed by priests who claimed access to unseen cosmic forces. Charvaka philosophers looked at all of that and asked a simple, devastating question: how do you know any of this is true? They weren't impressed by tradition. They weren't impressed by authority. If a priest claimed a ritual would secure your fate in the next life, Charvaka's response was essentially, show me. And since no one could show them an afterlife, a soul, or a god through direct experience, they rejected all three. This wasn't nihilism. It was a demand for evidence in a world that ran almost entirely on faith. If there's no soul and no afterlife, what happens to ethics? What stops someone from doing whatever they want? This is where Charvaka gets genuinely interesting. Without karma or rebirth hanging over your choices, the philosophy didn't collapse into chaos. Instead, it leaned on something simpler: enlightened self-interest. If this life is the only one you get, then causing harm to others tends to come back around in very real, very immediate ways. Broken trust, conflict, isolation. You don't need a cosmic ledger to see why cruelty is a bad strategy for living well. And as for pleasure, Charvaka's idea wasn't reckless hedonism. It was closer to this. Pain and pleasure are real, verifiable experiences, unlike a promised heaven or a feared hell. So pursuing well-being in this one life, while being mindful that actions have real consequences for the people around you, was treated as simply the most honest way to live, given what could actually be known. Here's the unsettling part. Almost none of the original Charvaka texts survive today. What we know about this philosophy comes almost entirely secondhand, through the writings of their opponents, who quoted Charvaka's ideas specifically to argue against them. Think about what that means. We are reconstructing the 2,500-year-old worldview using only the criticism of people who hated it. That's like trying to understand a person's entire personality, using only the angry voicemail their worst enemy left about them. Why did this happen? Because Charvaka's core method, demand evidence, reject unproven authority, was a direct threat to the religious and political institutions of its time. Priesthoods built their power on rituals nobody could verify. Kings often relied on that same religious authority to legitimize their rule. A philosophy that said prove it to all of that wasn't just a theological disagreement. It was dangerous. In some ways, Charvaka feels strangely modern, a kind of ancient ancestor to scientific skepticism, secular ethics, and the idea that evidence should matter more than authority. It's a reminder that the demand for proof isn't a uniquely Western or uniquely modern invention. People were asking, how do you actually know that? Thousands of years ago. And it cost them almost their entire written legacy. So here's a question worth sitting with. If there's no cosmic punishment or reward waiting for you, what actually keeps people good? Let me know what you think in the comments. That's Echoes of Ancient Minds, uncovering the philosophies history almost erased. If this kind of forgotten wisdom is your thing, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.